So I want to talk a little bit about exceptions and events. And first off, thinking about exceptions, I want to take a look at, formally at least, take a look at handling exceptions. I mean, exceptions are inevitable, and right now you're writing applications with robust data validation in terms of checking to see if data input is numeric. You're using a variety of different methods, including try-parsing or testing for numeric in the case of VB, using that cool isNumeric function or method. And of course, you're doing a lot of range validation as well. There's all around, by this point, we're used to all sorts of different validation rules that stem from business rules. Well, ultimately, all of these things could actually cause exceptions to occur within the execution of an application. So I've listed a number of different areas here where exceptions will occur if you leave them unhandled. Certainly taking the proactive approach, editing for these ahead of time, you avoid the exceptions, but some of these exceptions may still occur. So the idea of non-numeric input, numeric input that although numeric doesn't match the desired type. So we're looking specifically for an integer, yet there's a decimal value that's input. Certainly entries of values that are larger than the space defined. We could maybe just handle something called an overflow exception, where you're actually taking something larger than that defined data value would accommodate. And then of course there are all sorts of other issues that can come out of writing to files or databases or some other resource in a distributed application environment, as well as, and more specifically in our case, interaction with an object class that's outside of the designed accessibility for that class. So thinking in terms of trying to access something that you typically shouldn't be allowed to or can't access directly, or you're accessing improperly. In other words, not necessarily passing the appropriate number or right type of arguments to a method defined inside a class. So exceptions all stem out of the exception class or one of its subclasses, and I've included a link on this slide for you to go and investigate a little bit of that, and it'll give you a nice list of all of the different methods and properties that are available for all of the different exceptions. Typically, what you want to take a look at are the expected exceptions that you might incur during the course of development and during production of a particular application, and code explicitly for those proposed exceptions. Some of the common properties, all exceptions have these properties, and there's one method that all exceptions have in common. So the message, the stack trace, and the get type, and these of course can all be found in the Microsoft help pages on that link on the previous slide. But these are some of the things that you can use to help during development and debugging of an application, giving full and robust information as to what the possible source of the exception might be. There is a specific syntax in the handling of exceptions, and the basic syntax statement is a try catch, and optionally any additional catches for running in terms of most specific exception, so the one that you expect most of the time, to the next most specific, to the least specific, which could just be a general exception. There is also in the syntax of a try-catch statement a finally clause, which typically is set aside for any sort of cleanup activity, something you want to have occur regardless of which exception was thrown or whether or not exceptions were thrown. So just very quickly to end this video, I want to take a quick look at some of the syntax in action. And I go ahead here and I try to convert what the user input in the hours input text box, try to convert it to a decimal and store it into my local variable. And you'll notice here that I have a try nested within a try. I have nested try catch statements, and the reason for this is that I want to have not only specific messages for the specific text box entry and error, but I also want to ensure that I am setting the focus and selecting all of the value that was entered in error in the specific text box. So I've got a nested try catch, one for my hours, one for my rate, and then of course if I successfully pass through these, I've got an object here that I'm going ahead and assigning to. And here's my nested catches. So I've got an argument exception, which I'll cover in the next video, but I've also got a format exception, and then I've got an overflow exception on rate as well. And that's nested inside the same sort of logic for my hours. These have specific messages. This set is specific to rate, whereas the outer set in the nest is specific to hours. And then at the end of the whole thing, I have the least specific, and that's the overall sort of common exception. And this covers everything else, and this is where I've made good use of the stack trace and the get type and the general exception message. In the next video, we're going to actually take a look at throwing exceptions.